closes are going to blow saves. They would have a statistic for it if it never happened. But Nate Jones' blown save Wednesday made for a back-breaking loss that's become far too commonplace for the White Sox during this rebuilding. Home runs from Tim Anderson and Daniel Palka built a 4-0 lead early, much like the 4-0 lead the Southsiders had after one inning in Tuesday's eventual 10-6 loss to the visiting Pittsburgh Pirates, and Wellington Castillo provided some insurance with an RBI double to make it 5-2 in the eighth. But Jones never seemed to stand a chance, blowing that 3-run lead in 10 pitches. The first 5 hitters of the ninth went single, ground out, 2-run double, 2-run homer. Game, blouses. Just didn't execute right there, Jones said. We had some pitchers in mind. Didn't execute on my part, and big league hitters do what they're supposed to do when you leave pitchers up or in the zone. I paid for it. It's been a not so good for the White Sox, who are on a 5-game losing streak, a 1-9 in the last 10, a 4-10 in one-run games, have lost 3 games when leading after the 8th inning and a 3-15 at home, the worst 18-game in-home start in team history. It's also been a not so good return for Jones, who pitched in only 11 games in 2017. Entering Wednesday, Jones still had a very good 2.03 ERA. But HES had some glaring moments. He turned a 4-run game into a more manageable 3-run game in the 8th inning of that disastrous home opener. He made things nerve-wracking with 3 walks in the 9th inning of that 14-inning marathon in Oakland. He walked 2 of the first 3 hitters he faced in the 8th inning last week against the St. Louis Cardinals. He gave up a home run in Sunday's loss to the Minnesota Twins. After Wednesday's fiasco, his ERA sits at 4.40. He's now converted just 4 of his 24 career save opportunities with an 8.14 ERA in those chances. But this isn't to pile on Jones, one of the more affable guys in the White Sox clubhouse. After all, how many members of the White Sox bullpen have fared significantly better? Joakim Soria's ERA is 4.38. Hector Santiago's is 5.76. Aaron Bummer's is 5.06. Luis Avilan's is 5.23. Chris Volstad's is 5.19. Bruce Rondon's is 4.91. Gregory Infante and Juan Minaya, 2 guys who had good 2017s to earn places on the opening day roster were rapidly demoted to AAA, both sporting major league eras over 8.00. Danny Farquhar hasn't been an option for obvious reasons. There aren't many lockdown weapons out there for Renteria to turn to, leading to why he deemed Jones the guy he wanted out there in a save situation Wednesday. Based on results, easy answer no, Renteria said when asked his opinion on whether Jones has had a good to this point. But his arm strength, his life on his fastball, everything is pretty good. His changeup and slider, it's good. From the strength aspect, HES still very good. He's our best guy to finish it off. I couldn't have scripted it any better today, to be honest. We did exactly what we wanted to do, had the guy to close it out and we didn't. That's it. We played a really good ball game, we had a chance to win and weren't able to close it out. Rick Hahn's front office added some pieces to its rebuilding effort last summer when it traded away much of the big league bullpen. David Robertson, Anthony Swarak, Tommy Kahnle and Dan Jennings and eventually Tyler Clippard were all dealt away in deadline deals to acquire prospects. After the strategy worked as well as it did, it seemed a similar one was employed in building this relief corps. Soria, Avilan and Rondon, not to mention veteran adds who have yet to be summoned from AAA like Jeanmar Gomez, Xavier Cedeno and Robbie Ross Jr., were all low-risk acquisitions that could be flipped mid-season for another piece. But these guys need to pitch more like Robertson, Swarak, Kahnle and Jennings before those trades can happen. There's plenty of baseball remaining between now and the July 31st trade deadline, so that group has plenty of time to turn in good performances and turn into tradable assets. But until then, bringing in any number of guys from that bullpen seems like a move that could go south for the 9-25 White Sox. Michael Kopech is mowing down hitters at AAA. Eloy Jimenez is hitting the cover off the ball at AA Birmingham. Looking at the box scores from the minor leagues every day, you might wonder why these guys aren't already playing big league ball on the south side of Chicago. Looking at the major league club's record, you might wonder why these guys aren't already playing big league ball on the south side of Chicago. But don't worry. Rick Hahn's front office has its reasons. Basically, they come down to the fact that, despite what the numbers say, these guys aren't 100% major league ready just yet. Kopech has struck out 38 hitters in 30 innings. Jimenez has a 13-game hitting streak and a 9-game multi-hit streak. But that doesn't cover every aspect of the game. There are things that don't show up in the box score that Hanko are still wanting these guys to improve. And in case you're thinking of dusting off the old even if they aren't completely ready, how can they be any worse than what's currently been happening at the major league level argument? Don't. This was billed as a rebuilding, developmental one from the start, and it's been clear since the early stages of the off-season that the readiness of minor league players and the win-loss record of the big league team are completely independent of one another. The decision to promote anyone to Chicago, first of all, is not going to be based upon there being a need in Chicago, or not based upon underperformance of other players in Chicago, Hahn said Wednesday. As satisfying as it might be to reward the fans who have endured this rough start by dropping a top prospect in there as a bit of a cookie, to show progress in this process and to make the games perhaps a little more palatable, unfortunately, it just isn't going to be the motivation. It's going to be based upon the player having completed every element of his development that we could possibly have at the minor league level. There are certain things, as was the case last year with Yoan Moncada, that we just can't replicate in the minor leagues. Speed of the game, the way hitters react to pitches, the way the pitchers adjust to the hitters, the scrutiny, the grind, those things we can't replicate. But there is a lot that can still happen from a developmental standpoint down in the minors, and until the individual player has answered the questions we've had for them, they're going to remain there. They're going to dictate the schedule. Not what's going on in Chicago. Ideally you would like to have them poised for success from the start. We know how challenging it is at this level, we know that development is not linear, so we are prepared for the fact that a guy may struggle in Chicago and need to go back to the minors. I mean, it happens throughout the game and it's certainly not fatal towards a guy's development to him becoming an impact player. But yes, ideally you want them to come here, be able to establish himself early and have success, and continue to develop. Kopech's promotion has seemed inevitable as HES gotten off to a very strong start at AAA Charlotte. There was a good case to be made that he was the White Sox best pitcher at any level of the organization, majors included, when the team broke camp in Arizona. But as good as Kopech is and appears to be every fifth day, there are still reminders that he has things to improve on. His last start lasted only 3 innings and 66 pitches. There are contractual and financial reasons the White Sox could be delaying and would be smart to delay Kopech's debut until later in the. But even still, the priority has always seemed to be making sure everything has been appropriately developed in the minors. Heck, Kopech is only 22 years old with just 9 AAA starts under his belt. When they're getting close to getting here, I think it will be pretty obvious to everybody based on the performance, and one day we'll have an announcement that he'll be activated tomorrow, Hahn said. Kopech continues to progress, and important elements of his development are happening down there at Charlotte. Not just the number of change-ups HES throwing or the effectiveness of the change-up, but the stuff you can't really see in terms of his preparation and his reaction to adversity and how he responds to that in between starts. It's a process. Not all of it's obvious to the eyes, not all of it can be picked up from a stat line. We're definitely pleased with the progress, but there's work to be done. All right, so no surprise Kopech debut this weekend against the Cubs. Well, what about Jimenez, who is pretty much doing everything right down at AA Birmingham? Reading a memo from the Department of Accurate Statements, Hahn said, he's in a pretty good spot right now. So what more is there for Jimenez to accomplish in the minor leagues? There's plenty for him still to experience, according to Hahn. I think he'll be pitched a little bit differently when he gets to AAA, Hahn said. There'll be a bit of a more veteran-type staff. AA tends to be primarily a prospect level. Lot of guys with real good stuff who are trying to harness that stuff, speaking in general terms. And in AAA, you see a few more veteran types who might keep hitters off balance, get them to expand the zone a little bit more, are a little more on the finesse side of things, or at the very least have some more big league experience. They tend to approach or attack hitters a little bit differently. I do think he'll be attacked a little bit differently once he does get to Charlotte, and that'd be beneficial for him. And it's not just the 2 biggest names of the White Sox rebuild that all this applies to. Sebi Zavala, Zach Collins, Dylan Cease, Dane Dunning, Mika Rodolfo, Luis Alexander Basabe and Blake Rutherford are all putting up some very good numbers. But that's not the whole story of their ongoing development or the final determination that they're ready to advance through the system. A lot of it's the at-bat-to-at-bat consistency and approach, Hahn said. Some of it is playing the game the right way. When a man's on second and nobody out, are we taking an approach to get the guy over? What type of pitches are they doing damage on? Are they only doing damage on fastballs, or are they only doing damage on off-speed pitches? And what can we do to try to even that out if it's off balance? Lot of it is preparation and approach, and just making sure each AB is consistent in trying to accomplish what the overall goal for that player is. The guys who are putting up big numbers are probably doing a pretty good job in those categories. It's just there are things beyond simply the stat line that our development people and our scouts need to see before recommending a promotion. Jake Burger's development has been dealt another blow. The White Sox first-round pick in last year's draft re-tore his Achilles tendon while walking in his backyard, General Manager Rick Hahn announced Wednesday. This coming months after Burger initially suffered a ruptured Achilles tendon while running to first base during a Cactus League game in spring training. The initial news a few months back was bad enough for a young player who was climbing the prospect rankings and looking like a bigger and bigger part of the White Sox rebuilding effort. Burger's development was already going to be impacted greatly, as he was ruled out for the remainder of the 2018. But now, as Hahn said, Burger's recovery is back to square one, knocking him out 12 months from Tuesday, when he had his surgery. Unfortunately for Jake, we are now back to square one, Hahn said. The prognosis remains positive once this is healed. We expect him to have no restrictions in the future with regards to his baseball career. But as was the case after the first repair, the clock is now at 12 months, once again, until we expect to see him back in competitive games and playing regularly. Nothing the kid did wrong, no issue with anything along the path of his rehabilitation. Unfortunately, this apparently happens in a relatively small percentage of Achilles repairs. Despite his hard work, Jake suffered this re-injury. Burger is ranked as White Sox number 8 prospect and as one of the top 10 third-base prospects in the game by MLB Pipeline. That preseason vault into the organization's top 10 had fans as excited about Burger as they are about guys like Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert, Blake Rutherford and Zach Collins, and got Burger's name penciled into a few more of those future lineup projections. But while Hahn reported that Burger is expected to make a recovery, there is plenty of mysteries surrounding his timeline to reach the major leagues now. Burger earned his first-round status with a .328, .443, .648 slash line and 22 homers in his final collegiate at Missouri State. He then slashed .271, .335, .409 with 4 homers in 200 plate appearances with Class A Kannapolis last. But will this year plus delay in getting to his first professional mean hell arrive on the south side well after the rebuild reaches its apex if guys like Yoan Moncada, Tim Anderson, Jimenez, Robert, Mika Rodolfo and Collins are ready to form a contending lineup at the major league level? Will the White Sox act and fill a hole at third base before Burger is ready, and would a major free agent signing that fans desire, be it Manny Machado, Josh Donaldson, Nolan Arenado or someone else, mean Burger's path to the bigs is blocked? What does this mean for Burger's future at third base after suffering a pair of injuries that could cut down on his ability to move around at the hot corner that the White Sox front office has talked about so glowingly? Will he be forced to play a different position much like most of the other aspects of the rebuild? Time will give us answers to those questions. Right now, this is just a bout of real bad news for a young player with a bright future. The expectation is there's to be no long-term effect on his baseball career, Hahn said. It's just a matter of having lost the last 10 weeks of his rehabilitation and having to start over.